My heart sighed, for my innermost being was in dejection. Sleep no longer came, and sleeplessness was bewildering. Oh, who shall be the bearer of a message from me to Hussain, though the hearts and minds of some may disapprove? Slaughtered, though without sin himself, his shirt as if dyed through with crimson. Now the sword itself wails, and the spear shrieks, and the horse which once whinnied laments. The world quaked for the sake of the family of Muhammad. For their sake, the solid mountains might have melted away. Heavenly bodies sunk, the stars trembled. Oh, veils were torn and breasts were rent. He who asks blessing for the one sent from the tribe of Hashim, but attacks his sons, truly this is strange. And if my sin is love of the family of Muhammad, then that is a sin which I do not repent. Imam Muhammad Shafi. Assalamu alaikum. May the peace and blessings of the source of all peace and blessings be with you tonight. My name is Sarah Mustafavi, and I welcome you to this evening's program, a thought-provoking journey that will hopefully lead each of us to answer the call of Karbala. So thank you for coming tonight and commemorating the martyrdom of Imam Hussain and his companions. We are indeed blessed to share this evening with you, contemplating these significant days for all people of faith, discernment, and God consciousness. These are particular days of reflection and introspection. As our beloved prophet reminded us, Hussain is from me, and I am from Hussain. God loves whoever loves Hussain. That love of Hussain begins with knowing him. And to guide us through this evening, to provide us with a deeper understanding of who Imam Hussain and his followers were, and what the events surrounding Karbala mean for us today, we are grateful to have our panel of dedicated and knowledgeable leaders and scholars. We will begin the evening with Dr. John Andrew Morrow, who will talk about the call of Karbala. Dr. John Andrew Morrow, Imam Ilyas Islam, is the director of the Covenants Initiative. He is a proud member of the Michef Oti Pemi Siwak Nation, who embraced Islam at the age of 16. Dr. Morrow completed his PhD at the University of Toronto, where he studied Hispanic, Native, and Islamic studies. In addition to his academic pursuits, Dr. Morrow completed the full cycle of traditional Islamic seminary studies, both independently and at the hands of a series of Sunni, Shi'i, and Sufi scholars. He has authored a large body of scholarly works, including The Covenants of Muhammad and the Christians of the World, Restoring the Balance, and Islam and the People of the Book. His books will be available for sale after the program. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Morrow.
Assalamu alaikum. From the time I embraced Islam over 30 years ago, I was aware of the importance of visiting the prophets, messengers, imams, and other friends of Allah. Peace and blessings be upon them all. As the most merciful of the merciful mentions in the glorious Quran, whoever honors the symbols of Allah, indeed, it is from the piety of hearts. These signs or symbols signify anything or anyone that remind us of Allah, guide us to Allah, and draw us closer to Allah. I knew perfectly well that, if possible, performing pilgrimages to the graves of the Prophet and his purified progeny was an obligation. After all, as Almighty Allah dictated to the Prophet, say, no reward do I ask of you for this, except the love of those near of kin. The identity of those near of kin is indisputable. As Ibn Abbas narrated, when the above verse was revealed, the companions asked, O Messenger of Allah, Who are those near of kin whose love Allah has made obligatory for us? Upon that, the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, said, Ali, Fatima, and their 2 sons, repeating this sentence 3 times. The status of Imam Hussain, the grandson of the Prophet, and the son of Fatima and Ali is also incontrovertible. As the Messenger of Allah said, Husayn is from me, and I am from him. The Messenger of Allah, peace and blessings be upon him and his progeny, affirmed that Husayn was the leader of the youth of paradise. The Messenger of Allah, peace and blessings be upon him, stated that he was at war with anyone who was at war with Husayn and at peace with anyone who was at peace with him. The Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him and his purified progeny, also proclaimed that he loves anyone who loves Husayn and that he is angered with anyone who angers him. The tragedy that would befall Imam Husayn alayhi salam in the year 660 CE was not unbeknownst to the Messenger of Allah, peace and blessings be upon him. As Salama, Aisha, and Ibn Abbas reported, Almighty Allah showed the Prophet Muhammad a vision of the slaying of Imam Husayn, and the Archangel Gabriel even brought him some soil from the spot of his martyrdom. The Messenger of Allah had given this soil from Karbala to Salama, his spouse, which she kept in a jar. He foretold that it would become bloody when his grandson would be martyred, and so it came to pass. So when are you going to perform Arba'in? I was asked repeatedly by the lovers of Ahl al-Bayt. They were not judging, they were not nagging, they simply wanted to share the love. The years passed, the decades passed, and my answer remained the same. When the time comes, I will know. I had, in fact, been invited to Karbala on numerous occasions. There had always, however, been impediments, financial, personal, and professional. For many years, I simply did not have the funds to afford such a journey. For many years, my family obligations prevented me from extended travel. I had small children to care for. For many years, my work obligations made such a trip impossible. Finally, the security situation in Iraq was perilous for decades. When the time comes, I had always said, I will know and I will go. And that time came in August of 2017. A teacher and mentor of mine had traveled to Iraq for Arba'in only recently. This is the man who taught me the most important lesson in life and afterlife, the love of the Prophet and his family, peace and blessings be upon them. I had learned about Islam on my own through self-directed study from the age of 13 to 16. When I finally realized that I had always been a Muslim, I was now required to find some Muslim to witness my profession of faith. I had learned Islam by the book. I had never met a believing and observant Muslim before. Unfortunately, the first Muslims I came across were Salafi, Wahhabi, Takfiri jihadists. Ya Latif. I spent 2 years in the company of these mentally and spiritually disturbed entities. It did not take me long to realize that they were not Muslims according to any stretch of the imagination. Both in beliefs and practice, they were the absolute antithesis of everything I had learned from the Quran, the Sunnah, and the Seerah. Their myopic worldview revolved around prohibition, innovation, and excommunication. Violent, hate-filled, and intolerant, these terrorists soon tried to convince me to join the international jihad. By the grace of God, I came across some lovers of Ahl al-Bayt. They spoke of the Prophet, Fatima, Ali, Hassan, and Hussain with profound reverence. They showered them with praises and blessings. This stood in sharp contrast to the Salafi Wahhabis that I had met. They had nothing but contempt for the Prophet. They claimed that he was just a man like any other man. They claimed that God could have sent the revelation to anyone else. grotesque ingrates, these sons of Ibn Taymiyyah and Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab, slandered the Prophet, Fatima, Ali, Hassan, and Hussain, and asserted that the followers of the Ahl al-Bayt were infidels whose blood was permissible to shed with impunity. In a certain sense, God saved me twice, from ignorance of Islam and from false and fraudulent Islam. I saw clearly and lucidly that there were two traditions, the Islam of the Prophet and the anti-Islam of Abu Sufyan, the Islam of Ali and the anti-Islam of Muawiyah, the Islam of Husayn and the anti-Islam of Yazeed. In other words, the Islam of God and the anti-Islam of Satan. My friend and mentor, the man who taught me the lesson of love, showed me clearly that one could not love God without loving his prophet, and that one could not love the prophet without loving his progeny. When I met him at the Muslim Congress in 2017, he radiated with love and light when he spoke of Arba'in. When someone experiences such love, he wants to share it with those he loves. He stated, "I love you in Allah," he said as he embraced me, praying that God would grant me the blessing of visiting Imam Hussain, peace be upon him. And his prayer was answered, and the call came. When Imam Hussain alayhi salam calls someone, he does not pick up the phone. He does not send an email. He does not communicate via text messages. He calls you in your heart. And that is precisely what happened. He called my name. He spoke to my heart. He overwhelmed my soul and my spirit. The call was so compelling that it could have crushed a mountain and turned it to dust. Imagine a pleasure so intense that it causes tears to flow from one's eyes in ecstasy. Imagine every atom of one's body calling out, "Ya Hussain." Such is the call of the Imam, peace be upon him, the Lord of martyrs. I knew then, with knowledge of certainty, that I had to go. I could not say no. I had always been willing to visit the friend of Allah. However, I had awaited an invitation. I had now been granted permission. There were only a few weeks left until the start of Arba'in. Should I make plans to go? Should I reach out to the scholars who had been inviting me for years? I decided to do what I had done for years, place my trust in Allah. If the Imam had invited me, I figured, the Imam would take care of the arrangements. And so he did. "Did you receive the email that I forwarded you?" asked a friend of mine. "No," I responded as I set off to search my junk mail. And there it was, an invitation by the New Horizon Foundation in collaboration with the Imam Hussain Foundation to join a group of scholars, professors, diplomats, artists, authors, performers, and reporters on a pilgrimage to Karbala. "Are you going to accept?" asked my wife. The answer was obvious. How can I say no? To refuse the invitation of the Imam would be to deny my identity and existence. And so I accepted. And so the calls continued to come, day after day, at home, at work, while driving, all alone and in public. The calls were spiritual. They spoke to my soul. Soon they assumed an auditory aspect, and I could hear the cries of millions and millions of pilgrims shouting, "Ya Hussain." I could hear the salawats from the holy city of Karbala. Although it would be difficult to obtain a visa on such short notice, I placed my confidence in the Creator and the best of creation. A mere week before the estimated date of my departure, my father died and was revived. Died and was revived. Died and was revived. Died and was revived. And yet again died and was revived. He passed away 5 times in total. "Are you still going to Arba'in?" my wife asked. I said, "The father of my faith comes first." I received my visa on a Friday afternoon and left for Iraq 2 days later on a Sunday. The voyage was brutal, with layovers included, It took a full 24 hours by the time I left the Midwest United States and landed in the holy city of Najaf. I arrived at the hotel at 10:30 p.m., where I met my gracious hosts, Sister Zaynab Mehenna and her husband, Brother Nader Talibzadeh, the respected film producer. We commenced the walk on the very next day. We were placed in the competent hands of handlers, guides, hosts, and security staff provided by the Imam Hussain Foundation. Their professionalism and hospitality were unparalleled. The walk from Najaf to Karbala is like no other walk. It is described by some as the highway to heaven. For others, it is a dress rehearsal for the final gathering on the Day of Judgment. It is an experience unparalleled. Millions upon millions of people, estimated to reach 20 to 30 million pilgrims, many of whom are barefoot, walk 40 miles from Najaf, the city of Imam Ali, to Karbala, the city of Imam Hussain. It is a walk that passes through history, space, and time. It is also a walk towards the future. It is a journey of faith along the straight path that commences with Imam Ali, the successor of the Prophet, and ends with Imam Mahdi, who will establish his capital in Kufa and the government of God on earth. It is the mobilization of the forces of the 12th Imam who will liberate the oppressed and bring justice to the world. When they chant Labbaika Ya Hussain, they are chanting Labbaika Ya Mahdi. They pledge their allegiance to Imam Hussain, and they pledge their allegiance to Imam Muhammad al-Mahdi. May Allah hasten his rise. Iraq is a country that has been bruised, battered, and brutalized. It has suffered under the savagery of the Ba'ath regime. It suffered through a senseless fratricidal war with Iran. It has suffered from American wars of aggression, invasion, and occupation. Millions of civilians lost their lives. Although Iraq has little in terms of infrastructure and has spent over $100 billion in the war against ISIS, it hosts with pride and pleasure the largest religious gathering in the world, a peace march that receives essentially no attention by the major media outlets in the world, since it contradicts the Islamophobic narrative that they advance. The Saudis, with billions of dollars at their disposal, with a modern infrastructure and professional crowd controllers, struggle to accommodate a couple of million pilgrims with often disastrous consequences. Thousands upon thousands of people trampled to death. Karbala, a city that can barely contain 1 to 1.5 million people, sees its size multiplied 20 or 30 times. And yet nobody gets injured. Nobody gets trampled, because all believers are on their best behavior, united in their love of Imam Hussain. If the pilgrimage to Mecca is moving, it pales in comparison to the pilgrimage of Arba'in. The sheer magnitude of the single-minded pilgrims is staggering. 20 to 30 million people marching together, people from all walks of life, people from all social classes, people of all races, nationalities, and ethnicities, speaking every language imaginable, lovers of Ahl al-Bayt from every corner of the world, carrying the flags of their countries, but all united under the banner of Imam Hussain. The poorest of the poor proudly prepare tents to host the pilgrims from around the world. They are people who have essentially nothing, but give everything they have, saving all year to provide shelter and sustenance to the lovers of Hussain. From Najaf to Karbala, everything is offered free in the path of Allah and for the love of Hussain. People walk together, eat together, drink together, pray together, and sleep together. Miles upon miles of tents offering water, juice, tea, snacks, meals, and places to rest and sleep. Elderly men will beg, literally beg, to have the honor of washing and massaging the swollen feet of the pilgrims, while other equally eager men seize the opportunity to fix and mend their shoes. I was simply shattered by such humanity. It was the humility of Jesus Christ, Son of Mary. The care of the pilgrims is regarded as a religious duty. Over 10,000 mawakib, or tents, are set up, offering accommodations, food, beverage, dental, and medical services. Where else on earth can you wake up to find that your hosts, complete and total strangers, have washed and ironed your clothing while you were sleeping? I witnessed men massage the aching backs and shoulders of pilgrims who walked the path of Imam Hussain, which is none other but the path of love. I observed shepherds taking their sheep and camels to Karbala so that they can be blessed. I saw elderly men and women pushing themselves to their physical limits. I saw the sick, the infirm, and the handicapped struggling on their own or being pushed on wheelchairs by their loved ones. I saw scores of children and babies with red bandanas around their heads. I saw millions of people dressed in black, the color of the Prophet and his progeny, moving like waves in an ocean of humanity. And upon this sea, I saw replicas of the Ark of Ahl al-Bayt, echoing the words of the Prophet. My Ahl al-Bayt is like the Ark of Noah. Whoever embarked in it was saved, and whoever turned away from it perished. The march is richly symbolic. It is arduous. It requires discipline. It calls for sacrifice. It mirrors the journey of life and the path of the human soul. Ultimately, it is eternally rewarding. The messages I sent to my spouse during my physically and emotionally straining trek are indicative of the impact of Arba'in. So here's a selection of messages that I sent her that capture how I was feeling at the time. All is awesome. Love it. Life-altering experience. Labbaika ya Husayn. This is a place where heaven touches the earth. You need to visit the Imams. Your life will never be the same again. The love for Hussain will melt your heart and soul. I have never been so happy and so sad at the same time. Allah loves those who love Hussain. May Allah increase our love for Hussain. I could stay next to Hussain forever. It pains me to leave him. If you only felt the power of this place, even our non-Muslim guests feel the holiness, the barakah of this place is so powerful. I have made friends for life, met some truly wonderful people. God bless them all. This place is incredible. 20 million people walk together, pray together, eat together, and sleep together. Everything is free. You should see how they honor the Zuwar of Imam Hussain. People who have nothing share everything. They save all year to host the pilgrims. Old men will beg to wash and massage the feet of pilgrims. I have never seen such humility. The love these people have for Ahl al-Bayt is awe-inspiring. Their devotion to the Islam of the Prophet is profound, so saturated with spirituality. Went to a medical clinic for more medicine and an inhaler. Was not able to breathe. Immediate service, no wait, no charge, just a friendly smile. Everything for the love of Hussain. It never stops. Prayers, latmiyat, poetry, salawat, day and night. It is as if I died and went to heaven with choirs of angels singing. I will leave my heart here. A pilgrimage to Hussain is worth 1,000 pilgrimage to Mecca and 1,000 umrah. For every step taken to come here, 1,000 sins are erased, 1,000 blessings are given, and one station in heaven is raised 1,000 degrees. One leaves Karbala free of all sins like the day one was born. Gabriel comes down every night to visit Hussein's grave. Wallahi, you can feel his presence. The people who make this pilgrimage place their trust in God, but are prepared to die in the path of Allah. They fear none but Allah. So nice to not be the minority and to be surrounded by Ahl al-Haq from every corner of the world. This is going to be the capital of Imam Mahdi. May Allah hasten his rise. May Allah allow me the honor of answering his call. I have not ceased to cry since I arrived. The pilgrimage to Karbala is the peak of spirituality. The entire event emanates love. I have visited the mausoleums of many religious figures in my life, including a magnificent pilgrimage to the grave of Idris I, the great-great-grandson of the Prophet Muhammad in Zerhoun, Morocco, as well as his son and successor, Idris II in Fez. Although the Barakah Muhammadiyah found among the sons of Imam al-Hassan and the founders of the Idrisid dynasty was mighty, nothing could prepare me for the sheer spiritual power that shines from the sanctuary of Imam Hussain. Like millions of other pilgrims, I was drawn magnetically to the shrine of the Imam, and I could bask in his spiritual light forever. The Imam is the Qibla, the sign that points to Allah. By the grace of God and by the permission of the Imam, I was able to perform my pilgrimage to Karbala. I saw the power of faith put into practice. The sincerity of the salawat and latmiyat was soul-shaking. The movement of the masses was powerful and poetic. The power of the 7.3 magnitude earthquake that shook the city on November 13, 2017, while I was there, paled in comparison to the cries of love for Imam Hussain. I had the honor of visiting the sanctuary of Hazrat Abbas, the brave brother of Imam Hussain. I had the advantage of standing in the VIP section of the shrine of Imam Hussain at the peak of Arba'in, when emotions explode like the Big Bang. I had the privilege of meeting with the custodian of the Haramain, Sheikh Mahdi, the representative of Ayatollah Sistani, and was invited to give a talk at the shrine of Imam Hussain during a private gathering of 50 some odd dignitaries and guests. I was one of only few who was permitted to watch the Arba'in procession from the rooftop of the sacred sanctuary. MashaAllah, alhamdulillah. There, on the rooftop of the sacred sanctuary, as the sun set, night fell, and Arba'in, the 40th day, commenced, surrounded by millions of Muslims who were spiritually high on Hussain and intoxicated with his love. I stood, surrounded by the sublime lights and colors that shine from the holy sites. I sent my salutations to my beloved Hussain, whom I had waited for decades to visit. Assalamu alaykum ya Abdullah, assalamu alaykum ya ibn Rasulillah. Peace be upon you, father of Abdullah. Peace be upon you, son of the messenger of Allah. You called my name, ya Imam, and I answered your call. Praise be to Allah, who made my pilgrimage possible. May peace and blessings be upon Imam Hussain for calling my heart, and may Allah reward everyone who made my participation in Arba'in 2017 a reality. By Allah, I left my heart in Karbala. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Morrow, for that heartfelt journey from Najaf, Karbala. You've planted the seeds in my heart. Our next speaker is Sayyid Hadi Qazwini, and he will speak on the sacrifice of Hussain. Sayyid Hadi is an educator, public speaker, and lecturer in Islamic studies. He is a graduate of the Shi'i Islamic Seminary of Qom, where he received training in the traditional religious sciences under the guidance of many prominent Islamic scholars. He received his Bachelor's of Arts in Sociology from the University of California, Irvine, and his master's degree in Theology, Islamic Studies, and Leadership from Claremont School of Theology at Bayan Claremont in Claremont, California. Sayyid Hadi is currently pursuing his PhD in religion with a concentration in Islam at the University of Southern California. His areas of academic interest and research include Islamic intellectual history with a focus on Imami Shi'i theology, law, ritual, and culture. Welcome, Sayyid Hadi.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. In the name of God, most gracious, most merciful, may the peace and blessings of God be upon all of God's prophets and messengers, including God's most beloved and final messenger, the seal of the prophets, Muhammad, and his purified household and righteous companions. Dear friends, brothers and sisters, may God's peace and blessings be upon you all. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I'd like to first begin by offering my condolences to you all on the anniversary of the martyrdom of Imam Hussain. Peace and blessings of Allah be upon him. and his family members and his companions. I'd also like to take a moment to thank everyone at Hub Foundation, especially our brother Sam Hirbad, our sister Sarah Mustafavia, and especially my brother Zachary Marquith, who was not able to attend tonight. We heard that he and his wife are expecting their baby today, actually. And so we pray to Allah Almighty to make this a time of ease for them and to bless them with their newborn child, inshallah. I'm very proud of the work that's being done at this organization. I'm very impressed, and I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to bless everyone who is involved so as to continue doing great work, inshallah. The title of my talk tonight is The Sacrifice of Hussain, and it will focus on exploring two main questions. The first question pertains to the political, social, and religious circumstances of the Muslim community during the reign of the early Umayyads, and in particular Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan and Yazeed ibn Muawiyah. The second question pertains to the significance of Imam Husayn's resistance and martyrdom during that time and over the course of Muslim history, including its significance today. But before we begin exploring these two questions, I'd like to briefly say a word about the reason why we would even spend time to discuss something that occurred almost 1,400 years ago. Oftentimes, we may ask ourselves or are asked by others, why do we continue to remember this historical event? As tragic as the martyrdom of Imam Hussain and his companions was, why do we insist on recalling this event every single year and all around the globe? To briefly answer this important question, I would say this. Many of the problems that we face as human beings are a result of our forgetfulness. We've all come across the popular aphorism that tells us that those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Forgetting the past usually occurs in two ways. The first way pertains to the blatant and intentional erasure of history. We see an example of this when it comes to the history of our own country and how the earliest European settlers treated the natives of this land. Standard US history textbooks sometimes erase the tragic events of genocide and enslavement that occurred at the hands of the early settlers. Thus, what many people celebrate today as Thanksgiving is for others a day of tragic mourning. The second way that forgetting occurs is due to a conscious or unconscious effort on our part. The history is there, but we choose to close our eyes and ears to it or to remain indifferent to it. Now, the history and events surrounding the martyrdom of Imam Hussain, the grandson of the Holy Prophet Muhammad, may God's peace and blessings be upon them all, is an example of both processes of history forgetting. On the one hand, there were those who attempted to completely erase the history or misrepresent it through various methods. And on the other hand, there are those who simply choose to ignore this history or seem to have no idea that it exists. I've met many people in my own life who have told me that it was only when they became adults and they engaged in their own research and reading that they became aware of what happened to Imam Hussain and his family members and companions on the day of Ashura. Thus, in order to avoid the risk of repeating the mistakes of history and to ensure that we are able to observe the lessons this history provides for us, it's absolutely important that this history is recalled and pondered upon. Now, as I mentioned, my lecture tonight will focus on two main questions. First, what were the political, social, and religious circumstances that the Muslim community lived in during the reign of the Umayyads, especially Muawiyah ibn Abi Sufyan and his son Yazeed ibn Muawiyah? And number two, what was the significance of Imam Husayn's resistance and martyrdom during that time and over the course of Muslim history, including its significance today? Before I answer the first question, I must note that a comprehensive and complete survey of history is not possible in the time that we have today. Of course, it's also important to note here that the writing of history is almost never neutral. This is why we have to be very careful when we approach the historical records. But despite all of this, we can still attempt an overall sketch of some of the main events that took place in the early history of Islam in order to determine what was going on during the time and what led to the great tragedy of Karbala. When the Prophet Muhammad, may God's peace and blessings be upon him and his purified progeny, when he proclaimed his message, the Arab society at the time was in many ways a hot mess. Tribal affiliations, lineal prestige, and economic stature were prized and glorified. The Prophet came with a radical message that was based on social justice. No longer were old tribal and socio-economic privileges the standard of worth. The Prophet's message called everyone to the recognition of and obedience to one God and placed the true standard of worth to be God consciousness, piety, and righteous acts. This ideal is what the Holy Quran refers to in verse 13 of chapter 49. O humankind, we have created you from a male and a female and made you into nations and tribes that you come to recognize one another. Indeed, the best of you in the sight of God is the most God conscious. In verse 48 of chapter 5, the Quran states, we have given each of you a law and a way. Had God wanted, He could have made you all one nation. But God wanted to see who the most righteous amongst you are. So compete with one another in righteousness. The Prophet stressed the equality of everyone who recognized God and did good. In a famous tradition, he states, there is no difference between an Arab and a non-Arab except in God consciousness. And these were not just ideals, but practically implemented in the life of the Prophet himself. Unfortunately, however, after the Prophet's death, some of these values slowly began to fade away, and the old ways of tribalism, favoritism, and ethnic prejudice began to rear their ugly heads once again. This especially during the reign of the third caliph, Uthman ibn Affan. The historical records tell us that Uthman reigned as caliph for about 12 years, and that during the latter part of his caliphate, Uthman, during his time, began to distribute administrative posts and resources mostly to his kinsmen, including giving Muawiyah, the son of Abu Sufyan, the governorship of Asham, which is the greater Syrian province. Now, this sort of return to tribal favoritism would develop into full-fledged nepotism under Muawiyah and the Umayyads. The Umayyads would also heavily favor the Arabs over the non-Arab converts to Islam, the Mawali. Unfortunately, Uthman's favoritism resulted in a growing resentment of his actions, culminating in his murder by a group of disgruntled Muslims. After Uthman's assassination, the Muslims turned to Ali ibn Abi Talib for leadership and paid allegiance to him. It is very likely that this turn of events did not please Muawiyah, who by this time had gathered great material strength and the support of the Syrians, and perhaps had his eyes on the caliphate. Muawiyah openly rejected the authority of Imam Ali and refused to recognize him as caliph. This was in fact the first time since the death of the Prophet that the authority of the caliph would be openly rejected on such a large scale. Muawiyah's opposition to Imam Ali encouraged others to revolt as well. This included other companions of the Prophet such as Talha and Az-Zubayr, as well as the Prophet's widow Aisha. These revolts resulted in the major battles of Jamal, led by Talha, Zubayr, and Aisha, Siffin, led by Muawiyah, and Nahrawan, led by the Khawarij. These battles resulted in the tragic loss of tens of thousands of Muslim lives, including those of some of the Prophet's closest and most honored companions. The historical records tell us that Muawiyah's reasons for revolting against Imam Ali were that the latter was reluctant to hold Uthman's assassins accountable for their crimes. This makes it seem that Muawiyah was only doing what he considered to be the right thing and standing up against an injustice that had taken place. But we have to remember that besides being the caliph, Uthman ibn Affan was also an Umayyad, and thus was a close kinsman of Muawiyah. And history tells us that even before the advent of Islam, there was a great rivalry that spanned several generations between two clans within Quraysh, Bani Umayyah and Bani Hashim. Unfortunately, some of the sentiments of this rivalry would continue on after the advent of Islam. Thus, we find that one of the Prophet's staunchest opponents was the Umayyad Abu Sufyan, who was Muawiyah's father. Abu Sufyan is known to have led the opposition to the Prophet's message. He led the opposition during the Prophet's time in Mecca and while he was in Medina with the battles of Badr and Uhud. In the battle of Uhud, Hind, Abu Sufyan's wife and Muawiyah's mother, is known to have decapitated the body and bitten into the liver of the Prophet's uncle Hamza after he was martyred in battle. Abu Sufyan and his family's animosity towards the Prophet would only end toward the end of the Prophet's life after he reconquered Mecca in the 8th year after Hijrah, just 2 years before his own death. It was only then, and under the threat of death, that Abu Sufyan and his family, including Muawiyah, had accepted Islam. So it is very likely that Muawiyah's revolt against Imam Ali had something to do with his tribal animosity towards Bani Hashim, of which Imam Ali was now the head of. At any rate, Muawiyah's personality and his actions in many ways sharply diverged from the prophetic mission and teachings. For example, we see that Muawiyah was widely known to have lived a very lavish lifestyle, one resembling a king. In fact, reports in both Sunni and Shi'i sources tell us that after installing Muawiyah as the mayor of Damascus, the second caliph, Umar ibn al-Khattab, went to Damascus to visit Muawiyah. There, Umar described Muawiyah as the Khusro of the Arabs, a reference to Khusro, the Sasanian king. Muawiyah was also known to have enjoyed eating, so much so that a report tells us that the Prophet one day called his cousin and well-known companion Ibn Abbas and requested that he summon Muawiyah. Ibn Abbas returned to the Prophet and said, "Muawiyah is eating." The Prophet repeated his request after some time. Once again, Ibn Abbas returned and said, "He is still eating." To this, the Prophet replied, "May Muawiyah's belly never be filled." May Muawiyah's belly never be filled. And we've already mentioned the battles that took place against Imam Ali during his caliphate and the great number of casualties, including the deaths of some of the Prophet's closest companions. Among those who were killed fighting alongside Imam Ali in the Battle of Siffin, led by Muawiyah, was Ammar ibn Yasir. Ammar and his parents, for those of you who recall, his parents were Yasir and Sumayya, were among the very first people who accepted Islam. For this, they were tortured by the Meccans, resulting in the martyrdom of both Ammar's parents. And Sunni and Shi'i books of hadith mention that one day the Prophet turned to Ammar and foretold the latter's death. The Prophet told him, "O son of Sumayya, Yabna Sumayya, the rebellious party will kill you. تَقْتُلُكَ الْفِئَةُ الْبَاغِيَةُ. O Ammar, the rebellious party will kill you." After Imam Ali's assassination, his son Imam Hassan was proclaimed the caliph. Once again, this did not bode well with Muawiyah. However, to ensure that no more blood would be spilled after several devastating battles, Imam Hassan made a peace treaty with Muawiyah. But history tells us that Muawiyah soon broke the treaty and may have also had a hand in encouraging Imam Hassan's wife to poison and kill him. It is also well known that Muawiyah introduced and obligated the cursing of Imam Ali and his household during the prayer sermons in the mosques. This practice would continue for over 6 decades. For over 6 decades, Imam Ali and his family would be cursed from the pulpits of the different mosques. We are also told that in the year 51 after Hijrah, Muawiyah commanded the killing of the famous companion of the Prophet, Hujr ibn Adi al-Kindi, and a group of the companions of Imam Ali, after they refused to condemn Imam Ali and to relinquish their loyalty to him. These actions support the idea that Muawiyah was in fact not acting based on some ideal of justice, but rather on his clear animosity toward the family of the Prophet and their supporters. Finally, Muawiyah was the first to introduce dynastic rule by appointing his son Yazeed as his successor. Al-Dhahabi, the prominent 8th Islamic century Sunni scholar, suggests that Muawiyah came to Medina in the year 50 after Hijrah, after the death of Al-Hasan ibn Ali and the victory over Constantinople under the military leadership of his son Yazeed. And there he announced to Abdullah ibn Zubayr, the Prophet's maternal cousin, Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr, Abu Bakr's son, and Al-Husayn ibn Ali, the Prophet's grandson, his intention of announcing Yazeed as his successor. Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr voiced his concern, suggesting that Muawiyah should instead imitate either the Prophet or the first 2 caliphs in the matter of succession. This is Al-Dhahabi, he's recording this event. That is, that he should leave the issue to the community or to decide or appoint a group of companions to select a suitable candidate. Al-Dhahabi notes that Muawiyah refused and threatened all 3, Abdullah ibn Zubayr, Muhammad ibn Abi Bakr, and Al-Husayn ibn Ali. He threatened all 3 with death if any one of them objected to his announcement. The situation became worse after the death of Muawiyah and Yazeed's ascension to the throne. All major historians and scholars report that Yazeed was a known drunkard and that he publicly engaged in all sorts of indecent behavior. But his worst crime would undoubtedly be his command of the massacre of the Prophet's beloved grandson. Imam Hussain and his family members and companions in the year 61 after Hijrah, or 680 of the Common Era, only 50 years after the death of the Holy Prophet. But this tragic incident would not stop Yazeed from engaging in further evil behavior. Historians note that after the martyrdom of Imam Hussain, Yazeed ordered his troops to place a siege on the city of Medina, known as Al-Harra event. where hundreds of innocent Muslims were massacred. Yazeed would then instruct his forces to place a siege on the city of Mecca in their attempts to quell the revolt of Abdullah ibn Zubayr, whereby they even attacked the sacred Kaaba with catapults, destroying the Kaaba. Now, in light of what's been said so far, we can begin to answer our second question about the significance of Imam Husayn's resistance against Yazeed. In rising against Yazeed, Imam Husayn's objective was clear. It has been related that when the Imam was leaving the city of Medina, he announced his mission statement, إِنِّي لَمْ أَخْرُجْ أَشِّرًا وَلَا بَطِرًا وَلَا مُفْسِدًا وَلَا ظَالِمًا. I am not rising in insolence, nor in arrogance, nor in mischief, nor in tyranny. Rather, I am rising to seek reform of the community of my grandfather. I seek to enjoin good and forbid evil, and to follow in the footsteps of my grandfather and father. Imam Hussain was well aware of the continuously deteriorating political, social, and religious situation of the Muslim community under the reign of the Umayyads. Had he remained silent and acquiesced, it would have only gotten worse. Thus, he was fully committed to his responsibility to stand up against injustice, oppression, and immorality by resisting Yazeed, by resisting the prevalence of tribalism and nepotism, by resisting the normalization of indecency and immorality, and by resisting the widespread oppression. In the resistance of Imam Hussain, we see an unwavering commitment to truth and justice. And these values, truth and justice, are universal. They can never be compromised. This is what the Quran refers to in verse 8 of chapter 5. O believers, be steadfast for the cause of God and just in bearing witness. And let not a group's hostility to you cause you to deviate from justice. Be just, for it is closer to piety. And an orderly and functioning society must be based on these values, whereby each and every member of society, regardless of who he or she may be, is dedicated to their adoption and observance. This is why Imam Hussain and his followers were so ready to give up everything that they had, including their very lives, in order to pursue these values. Furthermore, the reason why Imam Husayn's resistance to falsehood, injustice, and oppression was so significant was that for Imam Hussain and his followers, these values were not simply abstract ideals or maxims that sounded great, but they were fully entrenched in their own personal lives and legacies. All of these points allow us to consider how Imam Husayn's resistance and sacrifice was not only significant 1,400 years ago, but also why it continues to hold weight even today, centuries after his martyrdom. Today, we live in a world that still suffers from large-scale injustices. I don't think that it's an over-exaggeration to state that injustice permeates every corner of the globe today. On the macro level, corrupt governments, politicians, and leaders continue to inflict oppression on their own citizens as well as those of other nations. Many of them are dedicated to pursuing their own personal interests and those of their family members and their friends at the expense of the majority of the world's population. While they amass limitless wealth and resources, countless men, women, and children are starving to death. While they extravagantly enjoy the pleasures of this life, countless men, women, and children are denied their most basic needs and rights. And this is not just occurring on the political level. It's occurring in the world of business, where CEOs and other business leaders and corporations are making a profit of billions of dollars, while those who perform the most difficult forms of manual labor are severely suffering. Injustice is also occurring in areas that one would assume would be the first line of defense against oppression. It is occurring in the name of God. It is occurring in the name of religion and in the name of all that is sacred, whereby some of the most vulnerable members of society are being taken advantage of and abused. But let's not go too far, because oppression and injustice are also prevalent on the micro level. How many of our community today engage in ethnocentric and tribal behavior, whereby if someone doesn't look like us, doesn't speak our language or our dialect, or does not adopt our cultural or religious point of view, is excluded from our community? When it comes to our social interactions and relationships, are we committed to the values of justice and righteousness? Do we truly view and interact with everyone around us based on our shared humanity, regardless of every form of social, religious, political, economic, or cultural difference, as Imam Ali reminds us with his instructions to Malik al-Ashtar, whereby he announced, people in relation to you are of two types, either your brothers and sisters in faith or your counterparts in creation. Do we truly, as the Quran commands us, support justice for the sake of God, even against ourselves and our parents and relatives, whether it be against the rich or the poor? Or do we also play the game of favoritism and prejudice? Do we truly care for the safety and health of everyone around us and are willing, as the Quran commands us, to feed and care for the needy without any expectation of recompense or thanks? Dear friends, Imam Hussein's resistance was a call for freedom. Freedom from injustice and oppression wherever it may be and from whomever it stems. It was a call for freedom from personal greed and pride, freedom from abuse, freedom from living a life of indecency and immorality, freedom from oppression of both the outer Yazeed as well as the inner Yazeed. I remember reading a story of a young man, a famous story, a 20-year-old young man who had the hopes of changing the world, making the world a better place. And so he gave himself 20 years, a time frame of 20 years to make the world a better place. And so the days and weeks and months and years passed by. He became 40 years old. He looked around. He noticed that the world was still pretty much the same way as it was 20 years ago. So he said, you know what? The world is a pretty big place. How about I try to change my country, and I'll give myself 20 years to do that. The days and the weeks and the months and years passed by. He became 60 years old. He noticed that his country was pretty much the same as it was 20 years ago. So he said, you know what? This is a pretty big country, right? If you want to fly from east to west, it takes you 6 or 7 hours. It's a pretty big place. Let me try to work on my city, and I'll give myself 20 years to make my city a better place. And so the days and the months and the weeks and the years, they go by, and after 20 years, he notices that his city is pretty much the same as it was before. And then he turns to himself at the age of 80 and he says, you know what? Let me try to make my family a better family. Let me make the members of my family better, and I'll give myself 20 years. But this poor old man did not know that his family members weren't really going to listen to him at the age of 80. And so the days and the weeks and the years went by, and it became his 100th birthday, and he looked around and he noticed that his family was still pretty much doing things the way that they were before. And it was at that time that he realized that perhaps his journey of changing the world should have began with himself. Imam Hussain teaches us that there is an outer Yazeed and an inner Yazeed. And if there is anything one lesson, one important lesson that we can take away from the life and legacy of Imam Hussain and his followers, it is that reform will always begin with oneself. So as we come together to commemorate the martyrdom of Imam Hussain and his family and companions, let us reevaluate ourselves, brothers and sisters. Let us reevaluate ourselves, our families, and our communities to see where it is that we can start in our pursuit of justice and truth. May God's peace and blessings be upon you all. Thank you. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you, Sayyid Hadi, for that journey through history. Our next speaker is Sister Nicole Correri, one of the preeminent female Shi'i speakers in North America, who aims to motivate the Muslim community to strive toward the ideals of Islam. With her academic background and passion for the religion, she's a powerful voice for English-speaking Muslims in the West. She imparts relevant and meaningful Islamic content to audiences with her well-researched work, guiding them to think, reflect, and act. She never fails to lend her voice to the cause of justice in the spirit of Fatima al-Zahra and Zaynab bint Ali, peace be upon them. She has studied Arabic with the Fawaki Institute since 2012. She's earned her master's degree in Islamic Studies and Christian-Muslim Relations at the Hartford Seminary and is currently a PhD student in Islamic Studies at Boston University. Welcome, Sister Nicole.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. You've had quite a lot to listen to so far. And I don't want to bring the mood down too much. This is an evening where we are remembering quite a significant tragedy. We've walked through some history. We've walked through the experience of the pilgrimage, and you've been touched by that emotional journey. Part of what I'm hoping to discuss with you this evening is about Zaynab, the sister of Imam Hussain, the granddaughter of the Holy Prophet, sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi wa sallam. I'm not used to hearing the salawat back. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Whenever I've lectured, I often refer to this phrase that is often repeated in any circle where the love of the Prophet is celebrated. And I often ask people, well, what have you just said? What are you referring to? What have you actually invoked? And the word is so beautiful because you're actually saying not only praise, but you're actually asking to be connected to the Ahlul Bayt. You're actually asking to be connected to the Prophet because it comes from an Arabic root word that means connection, wasala. And so whenever you say this phrase, it shouldn't be done tepidly or lightheartedly. It's actually something you should truly feel down into your toes. You should say it with all of your heart, and you should believe that when you say it, you actually are manifesting this connection. I know when I hear certain people speak, I can feel that connection so deeply. And it's such a blessing because when we invoke their names, they are actually here with us. They are actually present with us because part of our belief as Muslims is the belief in the unseen. And when we have this firm foundation, which is mentioned in Surah Baqarah, right, as one of the main beliefs of the believer, that you believe in the unseen. This is something that distinguishes us from secularists. This is something that distinguishes us from pure scientists who have to see the material world in order to believe truths. We are asked to not ignore the material world, but also recognize the immaterial. And so when you make these invocations, when you do your actual salah, you are asking to be connected with this divinity of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You are asking to be connected with the beloveds of Allah. And through this connection, you are elevated. Through this connection, your heart and soul are purified. But also, more importantly, your will, your human will is activated. And that is so critical. Because we've discussed today how just 50 years after the death of the Holy Prophet, the Muslims were in splinters. They were in disarray, they were in civil disharmony, and they were engaging in intra-Muslim war. They were violating one of the precepts that the Holy Prophet had established during his time, that Muslims are not supposed to be attacking each other. Hence, this is why we say Salamu Alaikum to each other. Have you thought about that? Think about it in context. Saying Salamu Alaikum at that time was putting down your arms, putting down tribal rebellion and tribal griefs and long-standing disputes. Saying Salamu Alaikum meant you can trust me. I am going to keep you safe. Yes? But tonight we heard how injustice is something we have to rectify in ourselves. Let me tell you one of the most important things a Muslim can do to another Muslim, and that is say, Salamu Alaikum. As somebody who's been a convert to Islam for a very long time, I'm not counting now, 29 forever. Anyway, that was funny. You can laugh. I get asked all the time, where are you from? Even today, when I went to have this printed at the hotel, and the lady behind the counter is from Afghanistan, she didn't say to me, what? What should she have said? Yeah. She said, where are you from? What does that mean? It means she doesn't conceive of me as a Muslim. It means for her, Muslims look one way, and I'm surprised that you're Muslim. I have walked into a group of scholars at an Islamic institute where everyone is studying about Islam. I'm there, dressed like I am now, and people greet me, hello. The other day, I went to a brunch with a group of Muslim sisters. The majority of them were Muslim. There was one non-Muslim there. She was white. I'm white. What do you think they said to me? Hello. Hi. Brothers and sisters, we can talk as much as we want, but until we put into practice simple justice, simple acts of humility and kindness, we will not be achieving what the Holy Prophet strove for, what the Imams died for, what the martyrs of Karbala stood for. I'm going to tell you about a little experience of how significant Karbala is. How many of you have been to Karbala? How many of you want to go to Karbala? How many of you have never thought of going to Karbala? I invite you. Imam Hussain invites you. And as Dr. Morrow so beautifully told you, look at the plenitude that is demonstrated. And it's not wajib. That whole event, that whole experience, it's not wajib. But because of this love, and because of who that is and what they represented, people give. Now, one of the most beautiful places that not a lot of pilgrims go to when they do make this journey to Karbala is the Khaymagah. Khaymagah means the place of the tents. This is where Abbas, the brother of Imam Hussain, put the tent poles in the ground, yes, and established the perimeter for the camp of Imam Hussain. He camped in the front, and this area is still highlighted. And then there were the tents of Imam Hussain, and then there were the tents of Zaynab and the women. When I sat there in prayer, when I sat and doing dhikr, I have never felt the presence of the truth of La ilaha illallah as much as I felt in that space. La ilaha illallah. Because when that pole was placed in the earth, when that camp was established, they knew they were not going anywhere else. That pole was a confirmation of their commitment to La ilaha illallah. I am not going to bow to injustice. I am not going to bow to oppression. And if it costs my life, I'm paying that price. When you sit in that space and you say La ilaha illallah, as I did, you may hear that repeated above your head by the angels. That's what I experienced. And I'm not making that up. I heard it above my head. And that's the moment that I realized what I just told you, what really took place there. That is unparalleled. Yes, we go to the Kaaba because this is a commandment. La ilaha illallah. This is required by us. Yes? This is where all of humanity circles, like the atoms, like the stars in the galaxies, like all creatures, yes? But this place, it's not required. It's not required to be there, but it was a place where La ilaha illallah was placed in the earth. Now think about that. When you place that energy wherever you are, and you work towards justice wherever you are, with whatever opportunities and experiences are presented to you, because Allah has put you there, then you are establishing that. Just like the family of the Prophet, just like the Prophet himself. Now imagine we do that with such intention, with such emotion, with such commitment, that we then generate that spiritual energy in that place we're at. What impact will that have in our home, in our community, in our cities? Yes? And now imagine networks of those commitments established in the earth. Can you see where I'm going? This is really our task. Today, I want to talk to you also about Zaynab, because she is such a significant figure in this story. And it's important for us, especially in our day and age, to ask the question, where are the women? Where are the women? Where are their stories? Where are their voices? Where are they demonstrating this that I can learn from as well? And we have these stories. They're not as well known. But in today's day and age, gender justice is really significant and important, and it can't be overlooked. You know, Zaynab represented the verse that Brother Hadi described, right? O ye who believe, stand out firmly for justice as witnesses to Allah, even as against yourselves or your parents or your kin, whether it be against rich or poor, for Allah can best distinguish between both. She embodied this verse in every possible way. And I want to highlight some of the things she did, and I want to talk about what she saw before my time is up today. We've heard about what the civil situation was during this time period. And I think for those of you who are hearing this story for the first time, you have to ask yourself, why didn't I know that history? Why haven't I been told the details of what was going on? Why am I given an image of this type of Islam that was perfect and pure, and there were these rulers, and then, then there were dynasties, and isn't that wonderful? The Muslims had this big rise. They moved into Spain, 700 years of glory, right? But there's more to the story. And it has to do with the choices that people made, choices that you have to make on a daily basis. I think knowing the true history here, knowing more of what took place, knowing about that civil discord and the vying for power helps us understand that, because we live in that kind of life too. And now we see that it doesn't just get pristine and pure like that, but there are choices that have to be made based on your human will. Islam is not magic. Quran is not magic. Right? The Khawarij were some of the best Quran reciters, but they were against the leader of their time. So Quran is not magic. Quran has to be infused into your human will and put into action. And that's something you have to participate in. It's not something that just descends upon you. And this is such a critical message for our community. So now, you've seen this picture. We see the turmoil. We wonder at how the community fractured. We talked about the treaty, how it was broken. We talked about how this whole event took place where the allegiance was demanded of Hussain. And yet the people, we didn't talk about this part, people of Kufa wanted Hussain. Thousands upon thousands of letters were written to him, some say upwards of 20,000 letters, to invite him to be the leader. So there's this tension between the rulers and the people made a choice. Now, I think there's something I like to point out about this event that some people don't even know of, even who hear about the story of Karbala regularly and repeat this every year in the majlis, yes? Hussain opened dialogue with his enemies. He tried to negotiate. He tried to resolve the conflict. He also tried to negotiate for the family and the people who were with him to be released. He said, your complaint is with me, not them. So what we see, again, is what? Human choice. We see that something good was offered and it was rejected. Something reasonable was negotiated, but it was ignored. And I think it's really important when we paint this picture of this event that we see it in its entirety. We see all the components. It didn't just happen overnight, but there were many things that took place, including this negotiation, including trying to resolve, trying to meet the people's needs, and trying to have some humanity. When I look at the event of Karbala, if I am to summarize some of the dichotomies, I would say that what Imam Hussain strove for, what Zaynab alayhi salam strove for, was to embody faith against godlessness, to create hope in the face of despair, to elevate freedom over tyranny, to engage in dialogue instead of rash violence, to promote love against hate, something very relevant to our time, justice against injustice, empathy against wickedness, freedom against oppression, compassion against inhumanity. This whole experience of those who were there on the side of Imam Hussain was about pure sacrifice. And in so many ways, this tragedy is unprecedented. Now, Zaynab, she can be, as I said, a role model for us. I want to give you a little picture of who she was based on some of our sources. And I think this is important because we're looking at what qualities did she have? What did she bring? What was her capacity like? How many of you know that she was a hafidha of the Quran and prophetic traditions? She was knowledgeable and able to answer jurisprudential questions. She often did so in the place of her brothers. There's a hadith that's attributed to Imam Zayn al-Abidin that says Zaynab was an alima ghayru mu'allim. She was a teacher who taught without having been taught. Yes? She's so knowledgeable, she doesn't need others' knowledge. All right? Now, often we don't know, where are the women? Where are their voices? Where were they in this history? We're seeing from Zaynab's history that she was fully engaged in understanding this deen, and she was fully engaged in disseminating knowledge and sharing that knowledge with men and women, and sharing this expertise and being available. Service, right? We see that. So people used to come asking questions about Islamic laws, and there are many hadith that are attributed to her specifically. She was often known to hold gatherings in Kufa related to the Quran, tafsir of the Quran. And as I mentioned, people would narrate from her directly. She represented Imam Zayn al-Abidin during his illness. So what does that show you? What does that show you? She's a counterpart. She's a leader. She stands at this level. That means she's an example. That means men and women can stand at this level together. And as was mentioned tonight, there are two things that are accepted for the superiority of a human being. You mentioned tribes, tribalism, lineage, wealth. These are things that people valued at the time of the Prophet. Hasn't changed very much, has it? Not really. But there's also another factor, gender. Men are valued more than women. How do we know that's true today and the time of the Prophet? What does the Quran say about what people would do when they had girls? Bury them. What happens today? What happens today? Yes, selective abortions. It's such a crisis in India and China that they actually have an abnormal rate of birth for males and females. It's disproportionately low, which is creating tremendous amount of social problems for people there. Women are now being kidnapped from villages in China and in India because there are not enough women in one particular community for marriage. Now look at that and think of all of the dimensions of that, right? It's horrific. That's just one example. So this hasn't changed. But Islam tells us, and the example of Zaynab shows us, that knowledge and piety are the two factors for superiority. Not your wealth, not your lineage, not your tribe, not your ethnicity, not your language, not your gender either. Not your gender either. Let's not forget that in this story. Because one of the most amazing things, too, about the story of Karbala is who was with Imam Hussain. It represented everyone, from infants to old age, from women to men, different religions, different races, they were there. And in so many ways, that's a picture of what the Prophet wished for his ummah, the diversity of people. And they're all there together. And in this story, all of them were standing for La ilaha illallah. We know Zaynab too by another name. She's known as al-Masa'ib, the mother of misfortune, because indeed she saw much tragedy throughout her life. She saw the death of her mother. She saw the death of her father, who took days to pass, yes? She saw the death of her brother, the death and martyrdom of Imam Hussain. She saw all of the companions and her sons on the battlefield in Karbala. She saw tragedy after tragedy. And sometimes the image we have of her, especially in the majalis, is of this weeping, despondent woman who is grief-stricken and ineffective and overtaken and irrational with grief. Sometimes that's the image that is portrayed in the majalis itself. But that's not the only picture of her. And that's not a correct picture of her, because the strength she had, the endurance she had, the leadership that she demonstrated. Now remember something very, very important. She saw a tremendous amount of tragedy, but yet still had the poise and eloquence to address the leaders of her time without fear. Under threat, in pain, post-trauma. For any of you who have ever had a traumatic experience in your life, maybe you've lived through war, maybe you've lived as an immigrant, maybe you've lived in very difficult situations, maybe you had some kind of personal trauma. Trauma is debilitating. Think of the trauma that Zaynab went through, what she saw, the heads of her family members in front of her for days, being in chains for days, being paraded about, being scoffed at, being looked down upon. Think of the immense emotional stresses. But yet, despite that, she still has a voice. She still stands up for justice. She saw so much fear. She saw everyone suffering. And she's a leader too, because she is also taking care of all of the survivors. She's also taking care of the sick Imam Zayn al-Abidin when he cannot stand up and lead. She is, and this is referenced in some historical works, the interim leader. Imam Hussain is dead. Imam Zayn al-Abidin is not actually leading at the moment. She's leading. She is helping those remnants of the family of the Ahlul Bayt stay together. And she becomes the one who initiates the majlis, the mourning of Imam Hussain. She's the one who starts this. She uses her voice to stir the hearts of people. She uses her voice to speak truth. She uses her voice to stand against oppression and injustice and intimidation. She's such an example. She's an example for leadership in ways that we can't even imagine. And all of this after all of that trauma and all of that distress. She was carrying, and remember, she was also asked by the Imam to do this role. She was carrying, and this is referenced in a book by an author named Shaheen, carrying the weighty inheritance of imamate, appointed as Hussein's representative. And this is something related in a hadith by Hakima, often quoted hadith reciter regarding the Imam specifically. But when we go to majalis sometimes the speakers have a hard time acknowledging this strength. Sometimes they struggle to portray her as the leader she was. Instead, they focus on her vulnerability, her weakness, her emotions, constructing females as emotional versus men who are rational. Please tell me how rational Yazeed was. Please tell me how rational those soldiers were who trampled on the body of Imam Hussain. Rationality resides within women and within men. Emotionality resides within men and within women. Strength resides within women and men. And so do not allow yourself to think in these binary terms, but recognize that a true moment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a whole human being. And in this way, we honor Zaynab as a leader, as an example of someone who has emotions, but has leadership, has feelings and compassion, but yet has dignity and strength and fortitude. And that's something a man or a woman can relate to. And as we noted today, Zachary and his wife are expecting a child. The strength, the power of that woman giving birth right now is unparalleled. May Allah bless them and their baby. And inshallah, to end tonight, let's just say a Fatiha for their health and well-being, and then a salawat at the end to honor the sacrifice, the commitment, the truth that the Ahlul Bayt embodied. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Maliki yawmiddin. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وأجل فرجهم. Thank you.
So this is a question for all of you. Nelson Mandela states, I have spent more than 20 years in prison. Then one night I decided to surrender by signing all the terms and conditions of the government. But suddenly I thought about Imam Hussain and the Karbala movement, and Imam Hussain gave me the strength to stand for the rights of freedom and liberation. And I did. So my question to you is, how can each of us respond to the call of Karbala today?
How do we respond to the call of Karbala? Baby steps. I think of Arba'in and how the people behave there on that one day. Imagine if we behaved like that every single day of the year. It would be a utopia, like heaven on earth. But yes, little steps. Expressing our solidarity with the oppressed of the earth, helping the poor, helping the needy. It's not, the top-down approach is not always wise. I'm more inclined towards a grassroots approach, bottom up. You start with the individual, with yourself, and then your family and your extended family, relatives and your community, and you build from there. The important thing is to be doing something. You don't want to be stagnant as a human being. You have to try to improve yourself every day. And by improving yourself, you improve everything around yourself.
One of the things I mentioned in my talk was that, for Imam Hussain and his followers, those who stood with him, these were not ideals. Justice wasn't just something that we spoke about and we glorified and we prized in the abstract, but in their personal lives. And so, there are many beautiful instances. On the day of Ashura itself, we're told that Imam Hussain stood up several times and he turned toward the enemy army. And Sister Nicole mentioned this. He opened lines of dialogue and he told them and he spoke with them, and some traditions say he wept for them. He wept. He cried, not for himself. He cried because he could not fathom how these people were so entrenched in their worldly life and they were so involved in the pleasures of this world that they would go to such an extreme as to kill the grandson of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and his family members, and even a 6-month-old child. His Abdullah Radi, the smallest martyr of that day, was 6 months old and he was killed. And so these emotions, his care for his enemies, even those who were standing and ready to kill, these things, they don't develop overnight. You can't develop compassion and justice overnight. These things require time. They require that we constantly check ourselves, reevaluate ourselves. When I think of Imam Hussain caring about even his enemies, I don't look at that as just one moment in history, but I look at his entire life from even when he was a child. And we read, the Quran tells us in Surah Al-Dahr or Surah Al-Insan gives us the story of the Ahlul Bayt. When after, the young Hassan and Hussain were ill, the Prophet and Imam Ali and Fatima al-Zahra, they made a vow that they would fast for 3 days if they were cured, and they did, and the entire family fasted for 3 days. And the Quran tells us that on each one of those days, at the time of iftar, at the time of breaking the fast, a needy person, a poor person would come and knock on the door, and history tells us that the Ahlul Bayt gathered all of the food that they had, which was several loaves of bread, nothing more, and maybe water, that they gathered these loaves of bread and they gave it to those who were in need. They cared for others before themselves. That instills in Imam Hussain, at that age, at that tender age, a realization. Of course, he's an Imam. He's from the family of the Prophet. But it instills in him as a child the importance of caring for others. And these are things that, we have to do in our own lives. We start with ourselves, we start with our children, and we reevaluate ourselves, and, it only begins to grow from there.
I'm going to add to that. I think, how many of you are wondering or imagining what you would do when you heard that? Honestly, raise your hand. Do you have an idea of how you would do what Brother Hadi just suggested? Does anybody have a picture in their mind of how they would do that? Okay, one. One of you. Okay. Two. Thank you. So all of you should start developing a picture of how you might do that. How might you put that into action? And how is service both something men and women should do? How many of you pictured women giving and doing some kind of charity? And how many of you pictured yourself as a man doing something that would be compassionate and caring? So as you noticed in my talk, I'm questioning gender, yes? This is the part of my PhD work too. Because as whole human beings, men and women express compassion and care, and the Ahlul Bayt embodied that. And that's the example that was just brought up. So make sure you're picturing something that you see yourself doing. Now I'll also add another part to that, which I just said, is do that in private, so no one sees it. You don't have to wear a t-shirt that announces it. You could do as a group, a big project that, who is Hussain, that's great. But I would encourage you to do it privately, so no one sees it. No one sees it. And I would also encourage you, if you wanted to live the story of Karbala and live it in your daily life, persistence. Embody persistence. That means if you have a goal for bettering yourself, your family, your business, your education, your own personal health, well-being, persist. Persist. If you have a goal that's related to increasing your ibadah, whether it is reciting Quran, how many of you know how to do tajweed? Please raise your hand. Tajweed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, only 10-ish, probably I count you, 11 and 12, can do that in this room. What does that say to you? That we have some work to do. So create a plan and persist to bring Islam, your ibadah, into your life. Create a plan that allows you to improve your own well-being, others' well-being, whatever goal it is you have for the sake of Allah. Because anything you do that's positive, whether it's improving your own well-being, your family's well-being, your community's well-being, your education, your job, is all ibadah. But also think of how you can actually improve some aspect of how you embody your deen. And persist. Persist when you're tired. Persist when you don't want to do it. Persist when you get bored. Persist when you don't have faith in yourself. Persist when you don't think that you can actually make it happen. Persist when people antagonize you or talk bad about you or discourage you. Persist, persist, persist. And I think in this way you embody this vision I've tried to give you of Zaynab alayhi salam, and certainly of Imam Hussain and the Holy Prophet. May peace and blessings be upon him.
you. This question is for Dr. Morrow, even though you don't like questions. In light of the Covenants Initiative and the martyrdom of Imam Hussain, how should we embody the defense of innocence? Could you briefly touch on the Covenants Initiative as well?
The Covenants Initiative was conceived by Charles Upton, also known as Sidi Akram. It calls upon Muslims to abide by the letters, treaties, and covenants that the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, granted to the Christian communities of his time. It's an initiative inspired by a book that I published titled The Covenants of the Prophet Muhammad with the Christians of the World. And so our blessed Prophet gave rights and privileges and protection to various communities, to the Jewish community, to the Samaritan community, different Christian denominations, and to the Zoroastrians. These are rights that were unprecedented historically. You would have to wait until the 20th century with the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, with the Charter of Rights and Freedom in Canada, constitutions from different Western nations, to find anything comparable in terms of human rights. And so, in terms of defending the innocent and defending the oppressed, we have to realize that the Prophet was caring and considerate. He didn't care exclusively about his community. He cared about other communities as well. And so by promoting these teachings and reaching out to our neighbors of different faiths, we can help to promote peace, goodwill, and understanding in the world. Going back to the other topic that we were talking about, it all boils down to putting Islam into practice. Now, when we talk about Islam, Islam is a huge thing, and it's overwhelming, right? And so when Sister Nicole was asking you concretely, what do you plan to do? Few people had something in mind. Really, it's like standing at the bottom of Mount Everest, looking up at the Himalayas. What am I going to do? Well, it all starts with that first step. There's this beautiful Hadith Qudsi found in Sunni and Shi'i sources. I'm just going to paraphrase some of it. It relates the dialogue between God and a human being on the Day of Judgment, in which God tells a human being, a son of Adam, that I was sick and you visited me not. And the human being asks, well, how could I have visited you, right, if you're the Lord of the world? And he said, didn't you know that my servant so-and-so was sick? Had you visited him, you would have found me with him. And it continues. I was thirsty, and you didn't give me to drink. I was hungry, and you didn't give me to eat. And it goes back to that. Such and such a person was thirsty, and you didn't give them to drink. Such and such a person was hungry, and you didn't feed them. And so, consider. See, there's one thing, you can give, and that's good. Okay, we can't do everything, but we have to do something. So yes, we fulfill our wajibat and all of that. That's a given. But on top of that, pick a cause and work for a certain cause. So you can give. That's great. But you get so much more when you actually do. When you go to that food bank and you volunteer to prepare food or to serve food. When you interact with other fellow human beings, you will find God among those people. You will find God in the most unlikely of places, among homeless people. You will find wisdom among inmates. So these are things to consider.
My question is that if we always give to the needy in secret, then it seems that we're not, especially for the day that we're living in, that the face of Islam is like being like in war and like brutal to people and all those things. It's like it's one thing that you see that it's shown in many different like media and different countries, poor countries, that they show like Christian, like from Christian community, they go and help and they make a good face for Christianities. And like with Islam is like they usually don't show it that way. And that's we all know that there are good help to poor people, but it's not publicly.
Can I just summarize what I think you're asking?
Yeah, sure.
So basically you're asking, don't we need to, as Muslims, also demonstrate good works so that others understand our religion or understand us as Muslims within this social context in a positive way? Absolutely, that's definitely being done, and you can participate in that. You can create initiatives. You can do things at your local schools. You can do things for your students. One of the reasons why I'm encouraging you to think about doing it privately is because, one, there's greater blessing in it, greater barakah, and also I'm thinking of it in gendered terms. Sometimes when we see people who are right up in those front rows, showing what they do, doing, most actions, taking the most initiatives, leading things, those people can actually be abusers back home. In fact, it's almost, if we look statistically, you will often see people who are in positions of power, people who are in certain positions, certain job types that demonstrate power, they tend to be abusive in their own relationships. So the reason why I'm saying do it in private is for both men and women here to demonstrate that commitment to the real service without needing to be given an accolade. So as a personal spiritual development, doing that for that purpose. You can certainly do it the other way, and there's value in that. But I'm saying let's try this other piece so that it's not about show, not about demonstrating to others, but it's actually about doing the work.
Could any one of you give us a good book to read about history of Islam, which is
Maybe Anas.
On du'as.org, there are a lot of great, Al-Islam, with sister site du'as.org. Al-Islam.org has a lot of great resources. One of them is a PDF version of the Restatement of Islamic History. That's a great resource and very readable. For those of you who want to get more in depth and read in a historical source, the Sirah from Ibn Ishaq is actually really enlightening. You see a real social picture of the Holy Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and you see him in action in lots of different circumstances. One story that stood out that I read from the Ibn Ishaq, just to give you a taste, is when the Prophet would go to Yemen, he spoke their dialect so well, they thought he was local. He knew so much about the people of Yemen that when he would travel there, he would ask about family members and who, uncles and cousins and different people who were related. And so much so that they had a phrase that said, he knows our land so well, it's like he's trampled the grass down here. That's such a beautiful human picture of the Prophet. So this is something you can get from reading Ibn Ishaq yourself. It's going to be dense and a lot, but you can get some beautiful, very early sources of the character and the social nature and the human qualities of the Prophet that are incredibly beautiful.
Assalamualaikum. I just wanted to ask you all this simple question. We're still considered a minority in terms of Muslims around the world. There's certain footage that especially comes around Muharram on many scholars talking about the history and details of what happened in Karbala versus what still might be going on in places like they consider them as like miracles that are happening, but it seems very far-stretched. And to, like in my household, I'm constantly defending that and trying to figure out how can I justify what is being said. Like for instance, my husband's not a Shia, but he brought out a a video just the other day that states that in some part of, I think, India, there are people who go into the forest and they beat themselves and use knives, and they die. But by the evening, they are up again and they're going back to their home. And the relation is that Hazrat Abbas has come and awoken them up. How are you going to defend such things? And what happens is they tend to ignore the basics of Shiaism, and then you're constantly defending. So is there a way we can move away from that and try and, or any suggestion you might have in helping that?
One thing that I think is important for us to remember is that in the event of Ashura and the sacrifice of Imam Hussain and his family members, there are limitless lessons. There are so many lessons that we find every time we remember this issue, year after year, something new comes out. Some of you here may have attended majalis for several years, maybe several decades, and you may have learned something new. I learned some things that, I had never known about before. And if we're going to talk about miracles of Imam Hussain, I think that's the greatest miracle. The greatest miracle of Imam Hussein's movement and resistance is that there is so much there to draw upon and to continue to learn and to implement in our lives, in our daily lives. It's so relevant for us, not just back then, but continues over the centuries and will continue moving forward until the end of time, until the Day of Judgment. So many lessons that can be drawn. And I think that if we can shift the focus of attention, because people are looking for miracles. I mean, I think I'm not an expert, so I don't know, but I feel like we always look towards miracles, right? It seems like it's kind of within our nature as human beings that we want to see some sort of, revelation in front of us. We want to see a miracle in front of us to confirm something that we might believe in or think about. And so it's not wrong to want to look for these sort of miracles, but I think that if we shift the focus away from what we would assume to be miracles, or what we would like to be miracles, or miracles in the very clear, the raising of the dead and whatnot, but to think about some of the more subtle miracles that come out from the resistance of Imam Hussain and the story of Ashura and everything that the events related before, during, and after. I think that can be very helpful and powerful.